The cold wind howled through the narrow streets of Mannheim, Germany, carrying with it the scent of rain and decay. It was 1842, and the city lay under a thick blanket of fog, its cobblestones slick with moisture. In the heart of the old town, a modest house stood dark against the mist, its windows like empty eyes staring into the night. Inside, the air was thick with tension, and the shadows seemed to move with a life of their own. Clara Miller? A young woman of only 20 sat in the corner of her small room, her knees drawn up to her chest, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. Her face was pale, her eyes hollow, staring blankly at the wall as if she could see through it, beyond it, into some other place, some other reality. For weeks now, she had been plagued by something she could not name, something that clawed at her mind, at her very soul. It had started with the whispers. At first, they were faint, barely audible, like the rustle of leaves in the wind or the distant murmur of a stream, but soon they grew louder, more insistent, filling her head with voices that did not belong. Voices that spoke in languages she did not understand. Voices that laughed, that mocked, that called her name with a cold familiarity that sent shivers down her spine. Her parents, devout Catholics, had tried everything. They prayed, they lit candles, they whispered their own desperate pleas to the heavens. But the whispers did not stop. Instead, they grew louder, more persistent. Clara began to see things, shadows moving where there should be none, faces in the mirrors that were not her own, eyes watching her from the dark corners of the room. She spoke of a presence, a malevolent force that seemed to seep through the very walls of the house. At first, her family thought she was ill, that perhaps she had taken a fever, or was suffering from some affliction of the mind. They called the doctor, who examined her with a look of grave concern. But the doctor found nothing he could explain, nothing he could treat. And so, in desperation, they turned to the church. Father Jakob Hoffmann was a man of middle age, his face lined with the marks of a life spent in service to God. He was known for his piety, for his strength of spirit, and for his unwavering faith in the face of the inexplicable. When Clara's parents came to him, their faces pale and drawn, he listened carefully, his brow furrowed in concern. He visited the house, his Bible in hand, his rosary hanging from his belt. The moment he stepped inside, he felt it. A coldness that seemed to seep into his very bones, a darkness that clung to the air like a shroud. He could see it in Clara's eyes when he met her. A darkness, an emptiness that seemed far too deep for one so young. "Do you believe in the devil, Father?" she whispered, her voice trembling, her eyes wide with fear. Father Hoffmann nodded, his gaze steady, though his heart was racing. "I believe in the power of God," he replied softly, "and in his ability to vanquish all evil." Clara's lips curled into a smile, but there was no warmth in it, no joy. "Then you should pray for yourself, Father," she hissed, her voice suddenly deeper, colder. "For he cannot help you here." The words hung in the air, heavy, oppressive. Father Hoffmann felt a chill run down his spine, but he did not flinch. He knew what he had to do. He would seek permission from the bishop for an exorcism, a last resort, but perhaps the only way to save the young woman's soul. The bishop granted his request, though with great hesitation. Exorcisms were rare, dangerous. They required a strength of spirit and an unwavering faith that few possessed. But Father Hoffmann was resolute. He gathered his tools, holy water, a crucifix, his well-worn Bible, and a small group of trusted parishioners who would pray with him, who would lend their voices to the battle against whatever darkness had taken hold of Clara. The day of the exorcism dawned cold and gray, the sky a heavy blanket of clouds that seemed to press down upon the earth. Father Hoffmann arrived at the Müller house, his face set, his hands steady, but inside his heart pounded with an anxious fear. The room was dark, the air thick with an unnatural chill. Clara lay on her bed, her body frail, her eyes sunken deep into her skull. As the priest approached, she began to thrash, her body convulsing violently, her hands clawing at the sheets. Her mouth opened in a silent scream, and then, without warning, a deep guttural voice erupted from her lips, a voice that was not hers, that could not be hers. "Get out," it roared, the sound reverberating through the small room like a peal of thunder. "She belongs to us." Father Hoffmann began his prayers, his voice steady, unwavering. "In the name of Christ, I command you to leave this child," he shouted, holding the crucifix before him like a shield. Clara's body convulsed again, her back arching off the bed, her limbs twisting at impossible angles. She laughed, a harsh, mocking sound that sent a wave of fear through those gathered around her. "You are nothing," she spat, her voice dripping with malice. "You cannot save her." The battle raged on for hours. The room grew colder, the air thicker, the shadows darker. Father Hoffman's prayers grew louder, more insistent, his hands trembling as he held the crucifix before him. The others prayed, their voices rising in a desperate chorus, their eyes wide with fear. "Reveal yourself," Father Hoffman demanded, his voice hoarse, his eyes burning with determination. "In the name of the Holy Trinity, I command you to reveal yourself." Clara's body went still, her eyes rolling back in her head. And then, slowly, her mouth twisted into a cruel smile. "We are many," she hissed, her voice a chilling whisper that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "We are legion." The air grew thick with a foul sulfuric smell, and the room seemed to vibrate with an unseen force. Father Hoffman continued his prayers, his voice unwavering, but inside he felt a creeping dread, a cold terror that threatened to consume him. The others faltered, their voices trembling, their eyes wide with fear. And then, without warning, Clara's body convulsed once more, her head jerking back, her mouth opening wide in a silent scream. Her eyes rolled back, and for a moment there was a terrible stillness, a silence so profound it seemed to swallow all sound. Then, with a final, guttural cry, her body went limp, her head falling forward, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The air grew still, the room quiet. Father Hoffman stepped forward, his hand trembling as he reached out to touch her forehead. Her skin was cold, but her eyes were clear, bright. "Is it over?" she whispered, her voice small, broken. Father Hoffman nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. "Yes, child," he murmured softly. "It is over." But as he turned to leave, a shadow crossed his path, a flicker in the corner of his eye. He felt a chill run down his spine, a cold breath on the back of his neck, and in that moment he knew the darkness had not truly left. It was still there, lurking in the shadows, waiting, watching. For evil, once invited, never truly departs. And in the quiet corners of Mannheim, in the dark places where the light of faith flickered dimly, there was a sense that something still lingered, something cold, something ancient, something that had only just begun.